So this video is sponsored by The Artisan Shop. I've been getting a lot of questions about this wet palette, so it's about time I told you. Now the embargo's dropped, I'll catch you after this. So guys, this wet palette ticks a hell of a lot of boxes for me, and it's not just because it's a wet palette. All wet palettes do the same job. However, this does a few more things that wet palettes don't do, and I've not seen a wet palette like this. And that's why we're doing this video. This video is sponsored by The Artisan Shop, who produce this product, but I've had this for quite a while now, and I really enjoy it, and it's replaced all, three of my other wet palettes, because it's very usable. So let's show you some of its key features. One, it's a decent wet palette. It does the job of a wet palette. Two, it's a very good dry palette. It's got wells in there, so it's good for all your washers. It's got multiple uses. It can hold all your brushes. It's good for traveling with. And there's even a little brush holder in there so they don't roll around all over your desk. And number three is it's potentially 3 palettes in one, because the lid, you can put a sponge in that, which it's just a little bit bigger than the normal wet palette side. And you can actually have 2 wet palettes and a dry palette set all out in front of you, or you and a friend, so you can sit and paint. Now, the main thing that I really like about this wet palette, firstly, is the sponge on this thing. I've had a few wet palettes from multiple companies, and the sponges have been okay, but the amount of water that the sponge holds in this palette is ridiculous. It holds about 200 mils of water, and when I've been painting for long periods of time, I've probably topped it up once, if that. Josh has mentioned that he's had his wet palette and has been using it for a week with the same water in, just slightly topping it up every now and again, and it stays wet for a long period of time, which is what you want if you're painting in short stints. You get 50 sheets of paper with this, and wet palette paper, people say use parchment paper, silicone papers, there's all sorts of different papers that people use. Every wet palette I've used has got its own dedicated paper. However, you'd think they're all the same. They're not. They all sort of work slightly differently. The paper on this palette just works well. It doesn't roll up like the others. It seems to not have pockets of air trapped under it. It just seems to stick to it. And how wet palettes work is on osmosis. People say some papers are quite absorbent. I've not witnessed that, and this definitely isn't absorbent. If anything, it's the other way around. It repels the paint a little bit, which is nice. It doesn't bleed through and stain the sponge, and that's even when I've used speed paints and inks and everything else on this as well, which is, again, an added bonus if you want to use them on a wet palette. Now the dry palette, it's a solid dry palette. I mean, everybody's had a palette with decent wells on. The only thing that I might start doing with mine is I might put a bit of cling film in it, so after a long painting session, I can peel the cling film out and throw it away. That's just so I can keep it nice, because I don't want to be scrubbing this hard and like every couple of months getting it all daubed up with crap. I'd like to just keep it clean, and a bit of cling film would solve that issue. But other than that, it's a decent dry palette. It's big enough for very large sessions. So the size of this palette, the wet, the dry, it's not a small palette like, for example, the Army Painter one or the Redgrass, the mini one. It's a little bit bigger than them, but it's not too big. And if you need it bigger, you do have the second sponge and the lid. So you could literally have 2 of the wet palettes out, which makes it to a very good size. And if you're doing a small project, you just use one side. If you're doing a very big project with loads of different colors, you just put your 2 wet palettes together and you've got a very big wet palette. And this is what I really like about it. It's all in one thing. It's ready to travel. If you go in anywhere, your brushes and everything, your dry palette, everything's in a nice little box. And I know it's just a gimmick. It's just another wet palette and a dry palette together. But every little thing that they've done, like decent paper, decent sponge, decent design, and with it being airtight, it's just an all-round good product. And it's nice to see a company like this that's making a product that we can use as miniature painters. They are an artist company for watercolours and oil colours. They have a range of brushes and all sorts of other artist products. And what they're doing works in wargaming. So I thought it'd be a good time to show you it. You've all been asking for it. And if you'd like to buy it in the UK, all the links are below. And I'll even put Amazon links and everything like that for all you guys in the US and everything to find it below. It's very modular, it's very small, it's a nitty little thing, and it's also the colours of my company, which makes it even better. But the Artisan Shop A, you've made a very, very good product, and I'm happy to use this and promote it to you guys. So if you're interested in it, check all the links below. I know a load of you have been reaching out, even emailing me and PMing me about this palette. All the links are below. If you buy it through there, I get a bit of a cut and it really helps me out, guys. So if you're interested, I love it. And it's the only palette that I'm ever gonna use because it fits so many purposes and so many uses. And that's it. It's a wet palette and a dry palette and a friendly palette. What more can you say? It's a palette. Palette, palette, palette. Palette. Wet palette.
Should probably wrap the video up.
Dry palette. I should finish up, shouldn't I?
Yeah, you should, yeah.
Did I mention it's a wet palette? But anyway, guys, thanks for watching. Thanks for tuning in. And like I say, if you want to support the channel, there's links to this. There's links to all my products as well. You buying them keeps us running and affording to keep changing bloody office every 2 minutes. But anyway, guys, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you again for the next video. Love, love, love. So I thought, it's about time we did a video, and the embargo has dropped, so I'm allowed to do it. So let me tell you about it. I'll catch you after this. I'll do another one.
What's an embargo?
The embargo's dropped, as in...
It's embargo.
Embargo. All right, brilliant. Yeah, I'll do it again.
I would.
Yeah. Comes with a little brush holder, which is quite nice. Fuck's sake. I'll put it on mute. However, every palette I've had has had its own proprietary... Every wet palette I've used has its own proprietary... Every wet palette I've used has got its own dedicated paper.
So just do half the...
It's that video again.